This is Global Fest for China and Southeast Asia. The earliest civilizations in China emerged around 8000 BCE along the Huanghe or Yellow rivers, where agriculture could be supported. Most of the rivers in China are located in the eastern portion of the country, where agriculture can flourish. Other parts of the country include deserts and mountainous regions in the north and west, leading to most of China's population centered in the eastern third of the country. Throughout history, the Chinese have referred to their nation as the Middle Kingdom, believing they were the center of the known world. Between 2000 BCE and 1911 CE, China was ruled by powerful families called dynasties. Although early myths indicate a dynasty called the Shi dynasty, the first real dynasty was the Shang dynasty, around 1600 BCE along the Huanghe River. The Shang established an early empire by conquering neighbors with a powerful army. They developed chariots for warfare and possibly borrowed these from the Middle East. There is reason to believe that the Shang set up trade across Asia with the Middle East, trading jade and silk and giving rise to the eventual Silk Road trading route. The Shang developed a pictograph-based writing system, which will lead to the eventual creation of Chinese characters. Belief systems emerged as well with the Shang, including the reading and deciphering of oracle bones, which was a form of fortune-telling or divination. The Shang also developed a belief system based on honoring and respecting one's ancestors and making offerings to these family members in remembrance. This is a type of ancestor veneration and will give rise to a belief system in China called Confucianism later on. China's second dynasty was the Zhou dynasty, around the mid-1000s BCE, lasting until 220 BCE. During the Zhou dynasty, a feudal system emerged for hundreds of years, and power was decentralized across China. Eventually, the Zhou dynasty crumbled. This is often called the Warring States period in Chinese history. However, the Zhou dynasty's turmoil and decline will lead to a cycle of rule in China that will last until 1911 CE, called the dynastic cycle. Under the dynastic cycle, a new dynasty would claim a divine right to rule called the Mandate of Heaven. New dynasties claiming the Mandate of Heaven would restore order to society after a period of turmoil, bringing relative peace and providing protection and prosperity to the people. Generations would live under a particular dynasty until hardship would befall the people. If people felt there was excessive taxation by their leaders, or if the dynasty failed to adequately protect people, a given dynasty could lose its right to rule. Other problems that could occur included failure by the dynasty to maintain the nation's infrastructure of roads and bridges, or by failing to treat people fairly. An old dynasty was then believed to have lost the mandate of heaven by the people. Natural disasters, or a period of hardship caused by a flood or earthquake or invasion, or even revolts by peasants, all will lead to a new dynasty claiming power. This cycle will continue in China until 1911, Common Era. Although the Zhou dynasty made many contributions to China, such as the world's first books, made contributions to astronomy, created accurate calendars, and produced beautiful silk fabric, they fell into decline and lost the mandate of heaven. It was also during the Zhou era that Confucianism emerged. Confucianism is a belief system based on the ideas of Confucius, a Zhou dynasty government official, and it stressed the importance of honoring order in society. Confucius wrote many of his ideas down in texts called the Analects. Confucius argued that society can only remain happy through social harmony. Social harmony, he believed, was based on respect for people in society. Confucian values fit in well with the dynastic cycle and the Mandate of Heaven concept. Confucianism stresses filial piety, meaning respect for one's elders. What emerged was a system based on 5 key relationships between people that had to be honored in order for society to remain stable. Confucianism was widely practiced by the Zhou dynasty. Another belief system that emerged during the Zhou dynasty was Taoism. Taoism stressed the importance of living in harmony with nature and is based on the teachings of its founder, named Lao Tzu, who taught people to follow the Tao, or the Way. Strict Taoists engaged in contemplation of the universe, and they withdrew from society. Taoists believe in a balance between two forces in the universe, the yin and yang. The yin stands for earth, darkness, and female forces. The yang stands for heaven, light, and male forces. The beliefs of Taoism were collected in two books, The Way of Virtue and the Zhangji. Following the hundreds of years of turmoil in China, known as the Warring State period, a new dynasty claimed the mandate of heaven, the Qin dynasty. The emperor who led the Qin dynasty was Shi Huangdi, which means first emperor. Shi Huangdi centralized his power, eliminated the feudal system, and consolidated his power by standardizing measurements, creating a national currency, standardized Chinese writing, and he repaired roads and bridges. Shi Huangdi also rejected Confucianism and instead adopted a far stricter belief system called legalism. Under legalism, people were forced to obey or else faced horribly strict consequences. Adherents to legalist principles felt that people were naturally evil and they needed a strong leader to make them obey or society would fall apart. Additionally, Shi Huangdi began building the Great Wall of China to defend his territory from invasion. Shi Huangdi also created the famous terracotta warriors as an army to protect his burial mound. The Han Dynasty lasted from 206 BC to 220 CE. Their first emperor was Gao Zhu, who helped stabilize China and who helped implement policies that allowed the Han to remain in power for 400 years. The early Han rejected legalism, and they reverted back to Confucianism. The most famous of the Han emperors was Wudi, who came to power around 141 BCE. Wudi is credited with establishing the Chinese civil service system, which was a merit system for those who wished to work in government. Potential government workers had to prove themselves by taking a civil service examination in order to hold government positions. The civil service system ensured that government employees were qualified. And it was also during the Han Dynasty that Confucianism became widely popular again. Wudi's leadership for the Han resulted in a golden age in China. The Chinese invented wood pulp paper, created the wheelbarrow, the fishing reel, rudders for ships. They developed acupuncture, anesthesia, and wrote science textbooks. The Han were also known for their jade and ivory carvings and worked extensively with bronze, ceramics, and silk. It was the Han who officially established the Silk Road trading route that stretched for 4,000 miles. The Han also moved into Manchuria and Korea and south into Southeast Asia, where they controlled Vietnam. The Han also controlled portions of Central Asia, including Tibet. However, after Wudi, many weak emperors ruled, and soon the Han fell into decline. The Han Dynasty ended around 200 CE, and China fell into a decline for almost 400 years. A general named Shaizong took power and claimed the mandate of heaven, establishing the Tang dynasty, or Tang dynasty, which ruled from 618 to 907 CE. The Tang established a capital at Xi'an and established tributary states in Korea, Vietnam, and Tibet. The Chinese also began trading with the Japanese during the Tang era. The Japanese will end up selectively borrowing portions of Chinese culture during the Tang era. The Tang dynasty was followed by the Song dynasty around 960 CE. The Song dynasty ruled until they were conquered by the Mongols in 1279 CE, and it's at that point that the Mongols became known as the Yuan dynasty in China. However, the Tang and Song dynasties helped China experience golden ages in terms of culture and government. Both dynasties used the civil service system and established Confucian values. Under the Tang and Song, a strict social hierarchy was established based on three social classes: the gentry, the peasants, and at the bottom, merchants. Merchants were considered lower than peasants in this system because they benefited from the labor of others. The Tang and Song dynasties also established a number of land reforms and tax reforms that benefited the peasants. There was much foreign trade under the Tang and Song, and they both used the world's first paper currency. They also richly contributed to literature and writing with the creation of calligraphy. Tang and Song architects created a new style of temple called pagoda. They also built a canal system called the Grand Canal, which linked the Huanghe and Yangtze rivers. The Tang and Song were followed by the Mongol invasion of China, and the rest of the world for that matter. The Mongols were nomadic herders and warriors from Central Asia with possible ancestry to the earlier Huns. Among these Mongols emerged a leader named Temujin, who eventually proclaimed himself the world emperor, or the Genghis Khan, around the 1100s CE. Under Genghis Khan, the Mongols conquered most of Asia, as well as parts of Europe, most notably, even early Kievan Russia. The Mongols possessed superior horsemanship skills and innovated the stirrup for more effective use during warfare. A stirrup is a device attached to a saddle that allows for a rider to stand up while the horse is galloping, allowing them to fire their bows and arrows at a gallop. The revolutionized Mongol stirrup allowed Mongols to quickly sweep through cities and conquer. Genghis Khan's descendants, called the Golden Horde, based on their tent color, continued this conquest into Russia between 1236 and 1241 CE. Other Mongol descendants also took over portions of Asia Minor and the Middle East during the 1300s under a leader named Timur the Lame, or Tamerlane. Mongol territories were soon divided into separate Mongol-held regions called Khanates. The specific group of Mongols who controlled the Chinese Khanate became known as the Yuan dynasty. It was the Yuan dynasty that claimed the mandate of heaven from the Song dynasty. The Yuan dynasty's most famous ruler was great-grandson of Genghis Khan, named Kublai Khan. The Mongol Yuan dynasty continued expansion into Southeast Asia and had many famous court visitors, including European explorer Marco Polo, who lived in China for a number of years. The Yuan dynasty built new cities, roads, and canals, and restored trade along the Silk Road. The Mongols established a golden era, with relative peace for hundreds of years, as long as tributes were paid to the Khanates. This golden age is often referred to as Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, and sometimes called Pax Mongolia. However, the Yuan dynasty experienced the Black Plague beginning in the 1340s and soon lost up to 40% of its population. This crisis will lead to the overthrow of the Yuan dynasty by the Ming dynasty in 1368. The Ming dynasty restored order to China and ruled between 1368 and 1344. The Ming dynasty restored order to China and ruled between 1368 and 1644. The Ming dynasty re-centralized power by building up the capital of Beijing and had the Forbidden City built within Beijing to house the emperor and the emperor's family. Some of the most extensive overseas exploration occurred under the Ming dynasty, including exploration between 1405 and 1433 by China's most famous explorer, Zhang He. His exploration included sea voyages across the Indian Ocean and Arabian Sea. However, the Ming suddenly stopped all exploration by sea in 1433 for unknown reasons. Beginning in the 1600s, the Ming dynasty fell into disrepair and decline. There was massive inflation, a series of weather-related disasters, and climate change resulted in frequent famines. Eventually, a group of people called the Manchus established the Qing dynasty. The Qing dynasty lasted from 1644 until 1912. The Qing attempted to tightly control trade with Europeans beginning in the 1690s. The Qing dynasty began to weaken in the late 1700s due to civil strife, corruption in government, and increasing European influence in China. Civil strife included the White Lotus Rebellion from 1796 to 1804, in which supporters of the former Ming dynasty attempted to overthrow the Qing dynasty unsuccessfully. Meanwhile, Western nations desperately wanted to trade with the Chinese. There were many products wanted from China. However, the Chinese were uninterested in Western products, which was really reflective of its Middle Kingdom beliefs that all outsiders were barbarians and uncivilized. During the European age of imperialism, European nations will use their weaponry and gunboat tactics to force unequal trade agreements on the Chinese and establish economic imperialism over China. It should be noted that China was never colonized by the Europeans. Rather, they used economic imperialism, meaning they attempted to control trade. This transpired following a series of conflicts between the British and Chinese known as the Opium Wars between 1839 and 1842. The British, with their modern military technology, handily won these and forced the Qing emperor to agree to the Treaty of Nanjing. This was the first of many unequal treaties with the Europeans that resulted in China eventually being divided up into spheres of European influence, where Europeans enjoyed almost exclusive economic but not political control. Compounding matters in China, there was internal crises like the Taiping Rebellion, in which Chinese people attempted to overthrow the Qing dynasty's government between 1850 and 1864. The rebels were unsuccessful, but 20 to 30 million people lost their lives in the process. Foreign influence further increased after the U.S. arranged for equal access to Chinese markets for all Western nations under the open door policy. Both economic imperialism and internal strife will lead to the eventual overthrow of the Qing dynasty by Sun Yat-sen in 1911, with the establishment of a new government. This democratic government was eventually led by nationalist Chiang Kai-shek, also known as Jiang Jieshi, until it was overthrown in 1949 by Mao Zedong and the Communists. Throughout history, China has had a profound impact on the part of the world that we refer to as Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia consists of a mainland area and an island area. It has been greatly influenced by traders from China and India who helped spread religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, and Islam. Vietnam was most influenced by China, however. The Chinese conquered Vietnam around 100 BCE and controlled the region until the 1100s. As a result, much of Vietnam's early culture reflects that of China, in the adoption of Confucian values, the civil service system, and similar government bureaucracy. The Buddhism practiced throughout Southeast Asia, however, differs from China. Most Southeast Asian Buddhists borrowed Buddhism from India and practiced the Theravada form. Islam was also introduced in the 1200s due to extensive trade with the Middle East. Indonesia and Malaysia have large Muslim populations today. Southeast Asia has always been part of the extensive Silk Road trade network, especially traders living on the Malay Peninsula. Spices began their journey westward from the Malay Peninsula at the port of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca has been an essential point of trade in the world, which continues even today. Powerful states and kingdoms emerged in Southeast Asia between 500 CE and 1400 CE, although people had been living there for thousands of years. These powerful states included the Khmer Kingdom in Cambodia between the 500s and 1400s, as well as the Srivijayan Empire between the 500s and 1100s, which controlled many Indonesian islands and part of the Malay Peninsula. Both of these empires were heavily influenced by Indian culture, especially with the adoption of Hinduism and Buddhism. The best example of this influence can be seen at the Temple of Angkor Wat, with its Indian-style stupas. Angkor Wat was originally built as a Hindu temple, but became a Buddhist cultural center as of the 1200s. A powerful kingdom called Burma, also known as Pagan, emerged between the 12 and 1400s as well. This kingdom contains parts of modern-day Thailand and Myanmar. During the European age of exploration, the Portuguese established trade during the 14 and 1500s in Southeast Asia, when they seized the Strait of Malacca and the port of Malacca on the Malay Peninsula. The Portuguese dominated spice trade during the 1500s in Southeast Asia, leading to the nickname the Spice Islands to describe the many island nations there. The Portuguese' influence was hated by the local populations. The Portuguese destroyed many Hindu and Buddhist temples, killed Muslims, and sank ships carrying faithful Muslims embarking on the Hajj journey. The Portuguese lost influence by the end of the 1500s and were followed by intense Dutch influence and control of the spice trade during the 1600s throughout Southeast Asia. The most influential Dutch force in the area was the Dutch East India Company, which seized the port of Malacca in 1641 and began intense trade with the Chinese. The Dutch remained in control of the spice trade in Southeast Asia until the 1700s and helped establish a slave-like system of labor in their possessions called the Dutch culture system. The Dutch called their spice islands the Dutch East Indies. Spain also had a hand in Southeast Asian colonization, taking over the Philippines in 1521. It remained under Spanish control until the end of the Spanish-American War in 1898, after which it eventually became an American territory and remained under U.S. control until 1946. Many other European countries colonized Southeast Asian nations during the 1800s in search of spices and resources like petroleum, rubber, copper, tin, chrome, aluminum ore. The British took over Singapore, as well as the rest of the Malay Peninsula. Great Britain also took over Burma, or Myanmar. The French also established a colonial empire in Southeast Asia during the 1800s. Nations like Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos became part of a region called French Indochina. Many people in these nations were converted to Catholicism by the French. The only Southeast Asian nation to remain free from European control was Thailand, whose king, Mongol, signed treaties with the French and English and actively embraced industrialization, as well as many Western-style reforms. Thailand formed a buffer zone between French Indochina and British-held Burma. Southeast Asian nations will not begin to gain independence from European colonial rule until after World War II. Thanks for listening. Bye.